Welcome into the Hustle Show podcast here. Another Hustle Short on this Friday, September 22nd, as we get set for week in college football. I'm Mark Zinno, joined by my good friend Brian Power, the best in the biz, at Brian Power
Oh,
underscore wins. I mean, look at him. He's just adorable. He's got great hair. He's got a wonderful smile. I mean, is there anybody I'd rather work with than Brian Power? I'm not really sure. But again, on Twitter, X, at Brian Power underscore wins, at Mark Zinno, MarkZinno. As always on Fridays, we'll do a big game breakdown of two different games on the college card and games that no one's talking about that they probably should be. And we'll start with a big game breakdown here with me, Brian, as we go out west of the Pac-12, which all of a sudden is the best conference in college football. Sit down, SEC. It's time for the Pac-12. And it's yeah, I know, right? But really, the only two remaining members of the Pac-12 are facing off against each other in Oregon State and Washington State as they head to Pullman, Washington here in a one of five matchups this weekend of unbeaten ranked teams going against each other. So absolutely going to be a great game. Oregon State 2.5-point favorite, total sitting at around 56. Not many people would have had this game, circled when the season started as one of the better games to watch, but it certainly has turned into that. Cougars quarterback Cam Ward, maybe one of the best quarterbacks in the country that no one's talking about. You're talking about a Cougars offense that is the third best passing offense in the nation, trailing only Washington and Colorado, seventh best offensive total yards, and 10th in passing efficiency. Now, I know the run game for Washington State isn't really great. Nakia Watson, their transfer from Wisconsin, only averaging 3.9 yards a carry, but this is still an offense that's built off the pass game. The one downside to this for Washington State is they're going to have to protect up front. Oregon State has 12 sacks on the season. That leads the Pac-12. They only had 20 all of last year. Now, the Cougars lead the conference in third down conversion percentage at 56% here, BP, which is an insane number.
Ooh.
On the flip side, Oregon State limiting their opponents to 31% on third down conversions. The Beavers' offense looks better at DJ Uiagalelei, but it's not still designed to be a pass-first offense. Damian Martinez is the locomotive that pulls, the train here. He averages 8.8 yards per carry. The Cougars had an average run defense last year, but they're starting the season out pretty stout, allowing 67 yards per game. So this is what it boils down to here in this game. The Cougars are going to have to contain Damian Martinez. They're going to have to convert on third downs and protect their quarterback. And if they do that, I like the Cougars in this spot at home as a home dog. Look, I genuinely, BP, I think this is a coin flip kind of game. It really is. Styles make fights, as they say. What wins out here? The passing game of Wisconsin or the running game and defense of Oregon State? I just think people still are undervaluing Washington State here a little bit and how good they are at home. They already have a Power 5 win at home this year against Wisconsin, a very similar type team, the way they play to what Oregon State does. So I think that they are their game for this one. Last year in Corvallis, tight one-score game heading into the fourth quarter. Beavers held the ball, though, for 35 minutes in that game. Cougars can't allow that to happen again. I like this much-improved Cougars offense here. Give me Washington State plus 2.5 at home for my big game breakdown.
Woo! Let's stay in the Pac-12 here, Mark. You want a trend? Please say yes. Otherwise, this will be an awkward segment.
Dude,
an awkward transition.
Yes. Trends are friends here.
All right. Last 18 times, we have had a top 25 matchup of two conference foes, and the spread has been 21 points or larger. The favorite has gone 14-4 ATS. That trend applies to this week's Colorado and Oregon game, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to be watching. And I remember, I don't know if it was the last time, but it certainly was one of the last few times that we had this trend apply. It was Michigan State and Ohio State. It was the year that Mel Tucker earned that contract that Michigan State is now desperately trying to get out of. And I remember that game because my father-in-law is a Michigan State alum, and I had to pretend the entire game I was not on Ohio State. And Ohio State just boat raced Sparty the entire time. They were a 21-point favorite, I think, just like Oregon was here. I'm not convinced Colorado-Oregon gets that ugly, Mark, but what I do know is this Colorado defense is really going to struggle to get stops on Saturday in Eugene against this Oregon offense. I know Coach Prime and company, they've shocked the world once as a 3T underdog. They beat TCU, but Oregon and TCU, there's a gulf there. There's a gulf between Oregon and Nebraska, Oregon and Colorado State, obviously. And remember, those last 2 weeks, Colorado got off to terrible starts. If they get off to a terrible start here, then they are in lots of trouble because they cannot come back against Oregon. I think it's notable. We have not heard a ton from Deion Sanders this week in the media, even though Oregon coach Dan Lanning had some pretty pointed remarks about the Colorado program and how little they've accomplished in recent times. There was nothing, no viral videos about, oh, this is personal. I think Dion may be treading lightly here against Oregon. Now, the one thing that may keep this and probably will keep this off my card is Dion, a proud man. You know he's not going to want to be embarrassed on national television. So unless the first half is really ugly, that back door is probably open for Colorado here. They're going to keep scoring. He's not going to want to get blown out. And I also do want to speak in general about the Pac-12 because both of our big game breakdowns were obviously in that conference. You and I were talking off air about the depth of this conference right now. You joked best conference in America. 8 teams currently in the top 25, 3 top 25 matchups this week alone. I think we're going to learn a lot, obviously, about these individual teams this week. And next week, I'm going to be far more interested to bet on them based on what we see this week, because I do have a lot of question marks about these teams entering week 4.
Well, here's what's going to happen with the Pac-12 in general, and this is what national people will say. Because you have so many ranked teams, there's going to be a certain component of cannibalization once we get into conference play, right? I mean, we saw it last year. UCLA lost to USC. USC lost to Utah. Oregon lost to, I forget who they lost, Washington at the end of the, like, all these teams are really good. It is the Conference of Champions. All these teams are really good, but somebody has to win these games. And so what will happen is this cannibalization effect may do what it did last year and leave some of these teams out that are otherwise really good. Washington's going to drop a game at some point to somebody. I don't think it's going to be this week to Cal, but, Washington will get got by somebody, as will likely USC, but may have the best chance to win this thing. But this Oregon team here is really good on the offensive and defensive end. I'm really curious how Oregon handles Shedeur Sanders in this game. I think that's the one thing you're hanging your hat on in backing the Buffaloes, that he just creates enough chaos when things break down and is able to, create plays that otherwise weren't scripted. And Travis Hunter is definitely a big loss for Colorado on both sides of the ball, for that matter. So that's a guy that's probably worth a point or two from a spread standpoint to Colorado that they're missing. I mean, generally my feeling is that Oregon, if Dan Lanning is trying to create what he created at Georgia defensively, is going to be a much more physical team than Colorado, and probably the most physical defense they've played to this point, obviously. So I think that component also plays into this game here. Don't be surprised. If I was going to do anything here, I would probably lay it in the first half with Oregon. If they don't get out to a big lead, guess what? They're not going to jump out to one in the second half. That's one of these things where if they ain't covering the first half number, they ain't covering the full game number. Because once Dion and Colorado feel like they're in the game, they're going to stay in the game.
Yeah.
You got to put this away early.
It's the opposite of last week, basically. When Colorado State got off to that great start, they had all the confidence in the world, believed they could win as 24-point underdogs. They ultimately didn't, because I thought Norvell coached rather cowardly down the stretch. But, hey, at least we got the cover with Colorado State late Saturday.
Speaking of confidence, let's pivot to games that nobody is talking about but probably should. Clark Lee, a confident fellow, the head coach of the Vanderbilt Commodores, told everybody that he was going to make Vanderbilt a national program. Well, they are if we come to academics. That's about it. Football, we still have some questions about what they do. They host the Kentucky Wildcats in Nashville here. And Kentucky is laying 13.5. Now, look, I am somebody who was high on Vanderbilt. I bet them in the opener against Hawaii. I was on the wrong side of that one. I wasn't on the wrong side about their offense. I was on the wrong side about the Commodores' defense, which kind of, in short, stinks. And they have given up a bunch of points. They gave up 40 to UNLV last week on the road, 36 the week before. And again, they gave up 28 to Hawaii, a team that's in complete rebuild in the beginning part of the year. So I have my concerns about this defense. But the bigger picture here is, how do you want to lay 2 touchdowns with the Kentucky Cats offense? That's the real thing. Look, I know Devin Leary is a transfer from NC State. He's not an upgrade to Will Levis. He's a plus quarterback. I don't think he's great. But is this a guy really that you feel like is going to, elevate this offense? The running game for Kentucky isn't what it used to be a couple of years ago, although they still are a ground and pound team. And that's really where I think Kentucky is going to make their bread here, is on the ground, because Vanderbilt gives up 147 yards per game on the ground. Mark Stoops may just go back to old school Kentucky football, run the ball, play defense, and everything else. But at the end of the day, this is just too many points for me to lay with a Wildcats team on the road in conference against, again, a Vanderbilt team that wants to prove to everybody that they aren't the dregs of the SEC anymore. So I think the back door will be open here. I think you're going to get a very good game out of A.J. Swan, who's got a live arm for Vanderbilt. If he can limit his turnovers, Swan really will be the difference here. Vanderbilt throws the ball very well. Kentucky is allowing over 200 passing yards per game, which is not typical of the Kentucky defense that we've come to know the last couple of years under Mark Stoops. So Vanderbilt doesn't have to stay within this number here. Way too many points to lay with the Kentucky Wildcats. Give me Vanderbilt plus the 13.5 here at home for a sleepy 12 o'clock start Kentucky might not be ready for in Nashville for my game that no one's talking about but probably should there, BP.
Yeah, just a couple follow-ups there. You talk about a potential sleepy start for Kentucky because it's a noon Eastern kick. Last year, Vandy snapped a preposterously long losing streak in the series to Kentucky. It was like 27 games in a row they lost to Kentucky. So they've got a little bit more confidence than normal. And who does Kentucky have on deck after this game? I believe it's Florida and Georgia. I can't remember the order, but I think those are the next two opponents. So the coaching staff, the players may have at least one eye pointed into those two games. Okay, for my game that no one is talking about but probably should, I will not go as deep as I did Tuesday on the college football show where I was mocked for talking Sam Houston State against Houston in a week where we have 7 top 25 matchups on the board. But I'm going to go North Carolina Pitt for you here, Mark. Sometimes you've simply just got to draw a line in the sand and say, I don't think a team is as bad as it's looked the last 2 weeks. And that's how I feel about Pitt heading into Saturday's game against North Carolina, where they are getting 7.5 points at home. Now, I have been a bit shocked, quite frankly, at how poorly Pitt quarterback Phil Jurkovec has played so far. He's been reunited with his old offensive coordinator from Boston College, Jurkovec. He transferred from BC this year. He's completing less than 50% of his pass attempts. In 2023, college football, that can't happen. Now, no one, probably not even Jurkovec's own mother, would dispute that UNC has the edge of quarterback in this game with Drake May. But I was shocked, Mark, to learn that May's TD to INT ratio through 3 games this season is 4-4. It's just as many interceptions as touchdowns. That is not the kind of numbers you would expect from a Heisman Trophy candidate. Now, remember, he lost his offensive coordinator from last year, Phil Longo, going to Wisconsin. That experiment hasn't worked so well in Madison. But the Tar Heels, they did win all 6 true road games last year. First time in school history, oh, by the way. All of them, though, were 1-score games. Even against lowly Virginia, they struggled on the road. I know there are bigger games on Saturday, gang, but Pat Narduzzi, the Pitt head coach, can absolutely not afford to get blown out at home in prime time. Game I'm talking about, nobody else's probably should be, will be taking the points with the Pitt Panthers Saturday night. I know Kelly in Vegas agrees, which makes me feel even better.
Well, once you get that endorsement, you know, it is the deity that you need to continue the rest of your existence. Love you, Kelly. But that said, you know, look, it's an interesting spot, and you know, their desperation is always an interesting factor in the game of football. Whenever you see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, coaches and teams that need to win and need to play well are interesting plays on, even as disgusting and ugly as it may feel. I tell you, close your eyes, turn the TV off, just check on the game in the second half and hope you're close, because watching that's got to be agonizing for 3 hours. So.
I mean, it'll be opposite Ohio State Notre Dame. Just watch that game and just, you know, maybe have your phone open or something. Exactly. Also, all of the last 10 meetings except last year between North Carolina and Pitt, they play almost every year except the COVID year. I think the game was canceled, have been decided by 7 points or less. So you've got a series history of close games here. Again, I'm not saying Pitt's going to win. All they got to do is keep it close.
All right, well, that'll do it for us here on this Friday edition of The Hustle Short. Again, every Thursday night, 7 p.m., right here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel, The Hustle Show podcast. Check it out in its full entirety. Of course, go back to the Wager Talk YouTube channel if you miss it on Thursday nights. Catch the full show. Absolutely worth it. Smash that like button. Tell us why you love the show as well. Make sure you subscribe to the Wager Talk YouTube channel. That's right, the thumbs up, BP. You give him the old, what has 2 thumbs up and loves the Wager Talk YouTube channel? This guy.
This guy.
There you go. That's the way. Full hours. So for Bryan Power, I'm Mark Zinno. Get ready for college football this weekend, NFL on Sunday, but stay locked in to the Hustle Show podcast and the Wager Talk YouTube channel. Appreciate you guys watching. Enjoy your Friday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.